Would you have the straight up audacity to demand more money from your employer to maintain your youthful look and upkeep as you're in a visible position? Because guess what? It's a thing. Botox, fillers, wardrobe, makeup, covering your grays. Yes, please. Blowouts, nails, added to the compensation on top of travel and accommodations. I know I have your attention. Okay, there is no way this podcast episode is not going to push all your buttons to either rethink some hardwired programming and check your own biases, or you're going to reject it altogether. Either way, I want to know what it does for you. Even during this conversation, I had to check my own internal misogyny, you're going to hear it, and limiting beliefs that we are already underwater as women. We're still being paid 76 cents on every man's dollar, and we want more? Phew! All right, breathe with me. Hear me out. Women pay real, measurable costs, and we do that to stay visible, to stay viable, to stay relevant and credible in our work. These costs, I know you know this, are exorbitant. They're uneven, they're structural, and never acknowledged. And you know me. I like to throw a grenade in Times Square on a fiery topic and say, wait. We need to talk about this. My guest today is Eleanor Beaton, and she's got such a unique and really worthy way of talking about this. But she's talking about it from a standpoint of data, economics, and power. And I really dig that combination, don't you? Eleanor is the founder of Safi Media and creator of the Jewel Business Accelerator, which is a growth system built for women scaling past $1 million in revenue. She has trained over 25,000 founders and analyzed more than 100,000 data points on female-led companies. She's also served as the chair of the Visiting Women's Executive Exchange Program at the Yale School of Management. She also hosts a top 0.5% global podcast for women leaders. Her work focuses on how women build power, price their work, and lead at scale when visibility and credibility matter a lot. And boy, am I so glad I'm bringing her to you. Now, before we jump into this conversation, I would love for you to send this episode to the powerful executive women you know. You know, the ones that are on the road, they're leading workshops, they're trying to get their cracked nail fixed in the airport, that might even be you, on their way to their next speaking event. Being a good steward is sharing these episodes like this, because it can create a groundswell of change when we're having the conversations in our own lives. And we need all hands on deck, okay? Text this episode to them right now. You can send it in your WhatsApp group chat of your entrepreneurs, whatever. Let's get to my chat with Eleanor Beaton. I am so excited to welcome Eleanor Beaton, the CEO and founder of Safi Media. Welcome, Eleanor.
I'm so looking forward to our conversation.
We're going to have so much fun, and this is going to be such a juicy conversation. And I'll tell you why. You know, I think somebody had reached out to me and talked about your story of you wanting to color your hair from the gray. What happened?
So every 6 weeks, like many women around the world, I march my butt down to my hairdresser. I pay multiple hundreds of dollars to get my grays covered. And one day I'm driving in the car with my older son, and I'm sort of griping about how unfair it was and how women had all of these costs associated with getting older that we, quote unquote, had to pay, my language. And he's like, well, Mom, you don't have to pay it. You could just choose to go gray. You don't have to make that investment. That's a personal choice that you're making. And I was impressed with his pushback. But I also asked myself, is this a choice? And technically, yes, I have full agency not to color my hair. But the reality is I work in a high visibility space. I'm a CEO, I'm a spokesperson for my company. My company represents and when you are a CEO and a spokesperson, it's really important that you put your best foot forward. For me, it's about representing things like innovation, growth, the future. And there are social norms around how we present ourselves. And I want to present myself with my best in the best light possible. Um, so I started talking about it. I started talking about these costs that I, as a woman who's 47 years old, pay that my male counterparts don't pay. And this isn't a men should be better. And it's also not, I don't know that I'm necessarily getting into a debate around beauty norms. A lot of people think that it's very unfeminist of me to to kind of have this opinion. But what I really felt, more so is that in high visibility industries or roles, which many women leaders are in, how we present ourselves and our presentation is actually critical infrastructure. And that infrastructure is much costlier for us. And it was really sort of my goal to start talking about it a little bit more openly. So women aren't taking on these costs and without sort of modeling for them, accounting for them, reflecting them in their pricing, in their negotiation conversations, et cetera.
That's so interesting. And when I was thinking about our conversation, and I remember maybe it was about a year ago. And you know how sometimes there are like these kind of fun, silly chat GPT prompts that go around? And one of the prompts that I had gotten that I put into chat GPT is, you know me so well now. What are my blind spots that I'm missing? Where could I shift my attention? And what I thought was like hit me like a slap in the face is my need for relevance. And when I started to think about, I had um, worked in the multi-level marketing space in my late 20s. I had done extremely well, made my first six figures and quit my corporate job. And I had a kind of a dream job in the corporate world that I was working in the radio and like radio corporate side of things. And I quit it and I racked up a whole ton of debt and was like, I can't do this and this sucks. And I went back to the corporate world. And so in my early 30s, I was working with people 10 years younger than I was. And then I had moved from uh, that role to Salesforce. And so I was in my 40s when I was working with people that were like hungry, younger salespeople that were 15 years younger than I was. And feeling like it is so important that I do not appear older, you know,
Mhm.
and all of the mind space and then the financial stuff that I'm somebody that pays a shitload of money for, every 4 weeks. There is never a gray. And I even have, I meant to bring it, but I have like a spray.
Yeah,
Like to get
I
rid
have
of
that too. Oh,
yeah,
I have that too for those
yeah,
emergency situations. Yeah.
exactly. I am not going gray. I am not. And no disrespect to anybody who doesn't. I have my own issues with it. But I'm wondering about this feeling of relevance and what that looks like around beauty norms. And then people that are like, fuck off. I am aging naturally, God bless them. But I am so worried and hate seeing my face and my body and my hair age. I hate it. Help
Well,
me, Eleanor.
yeah, listen, this is such a great conversation. And I think that here's my take on this. Every time, um, I think when we think about the costs that women pay disproportionately, and they're disproportionately expensive. So, for instance, not only can there be, and there's lots of research to back this up, the ageism in the workplace and how it disproportionately impacts women. So, my sort of core argument is the standards are unfair. I don't think there's any debate around that.
Yeah.
But you go ahead and pay them. I don't feel like paying it. You know what I mean?
Well,
I
what an
don't, right?
interesting thing.
Yeah,
So,
like I
like,
don't
what does that look like?
sorry.
So hold on, like, I
I
just
think
wanna pause here for a second,
yeah.
Eleanor. What you're saying is instead of so I'm thinking as an entrepreneur that you work predominantly with entrepreneurs and founders
Mhm.
that are you talking like tax write-off,
Mhm.
or are you talking as part of a compensation package to be able
Mhm.
to keep yourself up, which
Yeah.
has there's an internal misogyny there as well too,
Yeah.
and
I know,
patriarchal
it's
system. Like my
interesting, right?
brain is just going, Eleanor, help us.
Well, I studied economics and there's this core, concept in economics called externalities. And it's like when you, an example of an externality is basically a cost you didn't intend, right? And so the question becomes who pays that price? So an example of, so I don't look at, aging and doing my best to, color my hair and take care of myself and invest in a wardrobe that is timeless and looks great. There is certainly more economic cost to me to do that than my male counterparts.
Hmm.
So our clothing is more expensive, our grooming is more expensive, and not only is it more expensive, but the cost for us to not quote unquote keep ourselves up is disproportionately higher.
What does that look
So,
like?
yeah, well, I mean, it can be maybe $300 every 6 weeks for hair. It can be an extra $50 every 2 weeks for nails. It can be, between $100 and $200 every 8 weeks for Botox. It can be so it actually can rack up to anywhere $20 to $50,000 a year, just depending on the woman, 10 to 20 to as much as 50 grand a year. So currently, the problem is that it's actually quite difficult to legally write those things off. So, for instance, I live in Canada and you can't actually write those things off. And if you do, you're putting yourself at risk of flagging for an audit. Audits are massively expensive. You have to pay, an accountant to handle the audit on your behalf. You may have to pay arrears on taxes the government thinks that you owed. And these are legitimate, real costs. So what happens is women pay for these externalities with their own personal income. And we just do it. Women do what we've been doing for generations, which is we just kind of suck up externalities. So another example of an externality is, let's say that maybe some people have experienced this. You're a younger couple, you're earlier on in your life, your kids are young, and one parent has to be more flexible. There's one parent who's a bit more the go-to parent, picking kids up from school, dropping them off, taking them to practices. What we know is that in heterosexual couples, the majority of the time, the more flexible parent is the woman. And so, what is the cost? Well, if you need more flexibility, you're generally in careers that pay less. Um, People are paid a premium to be inflexible professionally. If you want flexibility, you are going to choose and start, working yourself into roles where you just naturally make less money. That's an externality. And so for women, one of my things is not necessarily it's not about solving the issue or telling women they shouldn't dye their hair, but it is, hey, this is a reality. It's a structural imbalance. So let's make sure we're clear about what these costs are and model for them. And so that can be, for instance, you can certainly talk to your, accountants and try to find ways to write it off. Or if you can't, like I can't, you can be looking for what you can be really thinking, what's truly required to be a visible leader in my space? What would be a reasonable budget to have the kind of upkeep that I feel that I need to put my best foot forward? And am I making sure that I'm accounting for that when I set my prices, when I look at my profit margins, when I, do let's make sure we're accounting for those things because otherwise it can look like you're just overspending on things. You know what I mean? I think that's quite unfair too. A lot of times women will be accused of overspending on clothes, on upkeep. I'm like, yeah, but there's a big price that people don't realize for us not to spend on these things.
I'm thinking of a lot of things. One is for the people that don't find it important to dye their hair and they choose,
Yep.
you know, to not incur those costs. And also that there's so much inherent judgment of what those costs incurred, even though it's just an added expense that we absorb, you know?
Yes.
Our society absorbs it. You know, I even think about my 10-year-old daughter. She is 10 and, she doesn't really know about shaving legs. Why do you shave legs? And I'm like, huh, why do you? Is it for
Yeah.
cleanliness? Does she have to do it? Is it for the male
Yeah.
gaze? As somebody, my daughter is not a girly girl. She's not. And it like, are we perpetuating something? It feels like, are we perpetuating an unsustainable, beauty standard of
Mhm.
upkeep? Is it feeding the problem or
Mhm.
is it helping
Mm.
the the gender wage gap? Like, there are a
Mhm.
bunch of different things. I'd be curious to get your perspective on it.
Yeah, so I'm sort of hearing two things, like, are we feeding a stereotype? And then
Yes.
how does this relate to the gender wage gap? And I actually think there's sort of, I see them as two separate issues. So I'll start with the first one. Are we sort of feeding the stereotype? And I
Yeah.
actually think this is a really great question. And it's a powerful moral question that people have usually very clear opinions on. Some people absolutely feel that even having this conversation and even saying that there's economic pressure, there's pressure on women to do this, that you are absolutely feeding a narrative. And so then they'll talk about, well, what about Helen Mirren? You know what I mean? What about like all these extraordinary women who have really chosen to embrace aging naturally? I generally um, tend to stay away from that question, not because I'm afraid of it, but more so because my interest lies elsewhere, which is really how do these legitimate structural to say that women don't pay the price, you know what I mean? Or to say that women aren't disadvantaged or don't experience disproportionate ageism would be not factual.
Totally.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's sort of where we do. And so then in light of that, there's a decision. And so some people are like, you know what? It really doesn't matter to me. I haven't really experienced it. This is like a non-issue for me. Or others might say, no, I see it. And I choose to present myself this way. And so that's the part where I'm like, okay, so if we're doing that, though, are we being clear about the costs? And are we making sure that we set ourselves up for success and modeling for those costs? So that's kind of like one part of it. Um, the second part really is about the gender wage gap. And the gender wage gap is interesting. It's actually primarily driven by almost exclusively by it derives from heterosexual couples where there's a mom and a dad, they have kids, and then they have to start making some decisions. High paying, demanding roles take a lot of time and energy. Raising children takes a lot of time and energy and cognitive load. And so inside the context of a household, a couple will decide to divvy up those responsibilities.
Sure.
And one partner will generally optimize for income, and the other partner will optimize for more flexibility. And the women disproportionately optimize for flexibility, and that immediately starts to put them into lower earning potential. And that is by far and away the biggest single lever driving the gender wage gap, which is interesting because it means that most of the people who are most concerned about and affected by the gender wage gap are typically the ones who unwittingly create it through very rational choices.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's a very rational
Yeah.
choice to do that. So those, I see them as sort of two separate pieces here. But, the thing I think that unites this conversation about beauty standards or paying, visibility as infrastructure, which is really what I think about, is let's not pretend it's not real. Let's take a look, let's account for it as best we can, rather than saying, "Oh, I just spend so much money. I must be vain. I just spend so much money." No, there's a reason that you're doing it. It is a legitimate, when you look at visibility as infrastructure, it's every bit as legitimate as a factory for a lot of different types of businesses. And it's time we sort of accepted it, took it seriously, and modeled those costs and incorporated them as legitimate costs rather than these vanity costs, which I don't actually think they are.
Hey, it's Allison. Thanks for listening. My guest today, Eleanor Beaton, knows that having a podcast to share your stories, insight, and ideas can make a huge impact in your brand and influencing change. And if you're looking to grow your impact and influence and income, a podcast is one of the greatest ways to do it. Don't be the best kept secret. You have an audience that is waiting for you. They just don't know you exist yet. You want to get a jump start? Go book a free clarity call with me at allisonhair.com/free call, and let's explore yours. Let's get back to the show. I think this is kind of a radical thought. Like, I think of even the patriarchal, resistance coming up of like, well, it's always been this way. Who is going to take this seriously? And I wonder, what does this look like structurally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think so for instance, I'll give you two examples.
Yeah.
One example would be, so let's say you are a leader working inside an organization and you are thinking about what's involved. So you're going into a new role. This is a role that involves lots of travel. It involves lots of speaking in media. It is a higher visibility, higher impact role. And what this is going to require is a few things. It's going to require, number one, like think about the time that you're going to need to spend maintaining. You know what I mean? So it's like probably for most women, it's going to be up to 8 hours per month. It could be 8 hours per month that you are spending on personal grooming that is a part and parcel of the unspoken expectation, around professional presentation. So that's thing number one.
It's so
Thing
crazy
number
when you
two.
think about that too, even like the time to shower, hair, makeup, even yourself. But like
Yeah.
the stuff you go out and spend money on, whether it's your nails, Botox, hair, grooming, clothes, shopping,
Yeah.
those kind of things, the LED masks that everybody's got
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Those are
Just sort of
hilarious.
exactly. So and it could be, wow, you're actually going to need to you're probably going to need to invest in a different wardrobe, you know what I mean, or more wardrobe. So what typically happens is women will just be like, "Oh yeah, that's just part of my personal costs." You know? But what I would be saying is, "Okay, so then to take on this role, what am I saying yes to? And when I go in to negotiate, what do I actually need to make this easier for myself, to make this doable without, you know what I mean, without taking on undue cost? How do I use this? How do I factor this into my negotiation?" I'm not suggesting, by the way, that people go and start asking their employers to pay for their
Yeah, I
Botox and
want a
everything else.
$30,000 facelift.
Right? Exactly.
It's
That's not at
fine.
all. But what I'm saying is, what a radical concept for women to factor into their negotiations what their infrastructure needs actually are. And rather than treating these as, oh, these are like these frivolous costs, they're
Yeah.
actually not. And the evidence would suggest they are legitimate infrastructure costs. And so without getting into, I need this money for XYZ, that's not it. But you're actually having an honest conversation with yourself about what's going to be required of you. How do your infrastructure needs change, It's no different than, let's say that you were taking on a carpentry job. And as you were getting employed as a foreman inside a really successful carpentry organization or construction company. And part of your job meant that you had to drive from site to site to site to oversee to part of your negotiation is going to be asking yourself, what kind of infrastructure is required? Do I want to use my family's vehicle to do this and put on all of that wear and tear? Absolutely not. So part of you're going to be making sure that either you're compensated for a new car that you can use, or you've got a company vehicle that you can use. This is a natural part of the conversation that sometimes women don't think about, enough. So that's like one example. Over on an entrepreneur side, it may be when I look at my budget for the year, I'm allocating my subscription costs. I know how much I'm going to have to pay in software subscription. I know that there's a few key professional development conferences I want to attend. I am going to take that course that I've been wanting to take on social media marketing. And then, hey, have I also factored in things like personal upkeep, which is required or is actually quite important when you are a visible public figure. So that's like what I'm talking about. I think how it works, it's actually, treating these things as infrastructure rather than moralizing them, but just being like, no, this is a legit business expense. How do I make sure, I'm factoring it in and accounting for it?
As I'm playing this out in my head and I think about what that would look like, I do feel an inevitable amount of shame that comes up
Mm.
with how much I need,
Yeah.
how much I need with that. So if I were negotiating my salary, if I were working in a
Mhm.
corporate world or a
Mhm.
promotion, does it look like, do I call it visibility cost? Do I call it
Mhm.
personal upkeep? I'd be embarrassed to
Mhm.
say
Mm.
personal upkeep, but
Mhm.
I understand the visibility aspect. And as an entrepreneur, I
Mhm.
understand kind of building that into the cost of doing
Yeah.
business, like
Yeah, yeah.
negotiating contract. Like that makes sense to me. If you're going to be speaking at an event, your whoever is booking the speaking engagement is going to pay for your travel. They're going to pay for, that kind of stuff. And hopefully it's not going to be the bare minimum. It's going to have some
Mhm.
beef to it. I guess I'm just wondering how we change the narrative in
Mhm.
society because this
Mm.
is a big ask.
Yeah. I don't think we do. I don't
Okay,
think
tell
we
me
do.
more.
Yeah, I don't think we need to over-explain it at all. I think it's just a part of what is.
I like
So
your
let's say you
boldness,
are
Eleanor.
negotiating. Yeah, yeah,
Like it.
like, let's say you are negotiating. You've got a big promotion, it's changing a lot of things, it's shifting, it's a big step up, and it's gonna require different things of you. You're going into that negotiation, and you're saying, "Hey, there's a ton of alignment here. Now let's talk about compensation. This is what I'm looking for. And I think this number is really in line with the level of authority, responsibility,
Mm,
and visibility that's required of me in this role."
I
That's
love
it.
that.
You know what I mean? Versus like there's like your internal math and your external math. And it's a great clarifying question that you're asking. It's like your internal math and external math. I think that, when women put ourselves in a situation where we give other people the power to nickel and dime us, and they get to decide on what they consider to be necessary infrastructure versus what's not, that's a problem, So yeah, I think it's just kind of, to me, it's part of your internal factoring.
I also
Yeah.
think, when they talk about the gender wage gap,
Yeah.
they talk about women generally will ask for 20% less than they need because they're afraid that there's only one. They will lose to the competition, they're asking too much.
Mhm.
Men will typically ask for 20% more than what they need and won't even think about it, and they will get
Mm.
it. And
Yeah.
it's again, there is, like, some embedded self-worth,
Mhm.
um, confidence that is required to be in a position of leadership. You can be really, really strong business, but that
Mhm.
doesn't always reflect on the inside. You could have masked
Mhm.
it very well.
Mhm.
And I think it's an important distinction to make as we think about the worthiness of what is life going to look like and what is required
Mhm.
to step up in this role and to step up
Yeah.
into this new thing. I'd be curious of your perspective on that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I have a different take on this,
I love
as you can
it.
probably
Tell
as you can
me.
probably expect. So, I hear about I hear, anecdotally, and I hear stories about, women feeling unworthy or lacking confidence. I don't actually see a ton of evidence of it.
Okay, tell me
Yeah,
more.
I actually don't see a ton of evidence. Like, when I think about I'm around women all the time. So, like, I every week for years, I've played soccer with a group of women over 30, and we play all these different teams, and I'm out there, and I just see a bunch of women doing their thing, being confident. We're for all different sort of walks of life. Do they doubt themselves sometimes? For sure. But overall, I just sort of generally see a group of women relatively confident in who they are. I have worked with thousands of women through, and gotten the chance to connect with thousands of women through the work that I do. I fundamentally see mostly confident women. Honestly,
I love
I
this.
think, yeah, I hear that I hear sometimes that women feel a lack of worthiness. But for instance, I actually don't think I actually, my lived experience is that that's less what I see. What I do see are sometimes women who didn't realize they could ask for things
Hmm.
because what the fundamental gap is a lack of access to networks. So, for instance, when you look at, like, let's take the thing of negotiating, which is a great example. You know, women's networks often really prioritize and emphasize emotional connection, um, and often sort of networking across and connecting with peers and sort of that close peer support. Men's professional networks are actually different. They're less about that sort of emotional connection. Not that that's not there, but they're really looking for access to information, access to networks, to introductions. And they tend to get greater exposure to commercially valuable information, how to negotiate, what people are asking for. You know what I mean? So I think that when women see the models, when we see, oh, I could ask for that. Oh, you mean I don't have to explain why I want more money?
Hmm.
I can just say that, this is what I feel is in line. I could just say that. I think as soon as we start to see that, then we are like, "Oh, okay." We often the way sort of, for instance, our relational or networking structures, we don't get that same access to that kind of information, and so we don't know to ask for it. It's very the sort of common way is we don't have that self-worth or that confidence. I and I hear that a lot, but what I mostly see, in my work with women in their 40s and so on is primarily confident. Like 85% of the women that I connect with are really quite confident. You know what I mean? 15%, but I think that's how the world is. So that's my take on it.
So I think what I'm hearing as well is the access to networks piece because
Yeah.
I mean you work with primarily women who are entrepreneurs that are I don't know revenue of 200K to over 2
Mhm.
million.
Mhm.
I think that's what I had, which
Yeah.
obviously when you get to a certain level of success, there, some of that
Yeah.
has to come with
Yeah.
confidence and
Just
competence.
established. Yeah.
Yeah, just established with that. And
Yeah.
I'm even wondering, I noticed you had posted the day we're recording. You had posted about a job opening, and I read through
Yes.
the job opening, and I thought, how interesting that you're like, here's what it is, here's what it's not, and you were looking for. I'm going to get it wrong, but
Yeah.
like, I think somebody to help from a strategic perspective, the
Yeah.
founders that you work with. And I like where you said it is not mindset coaching. This is not an emotional support. And I
Yeah.
thought it was a very clear distinction of, what fills that gap when
Yeah.
you're working with women, and how do we kind of create a different environment that allows people the access to say it's all around me of, oh, I can ask for that. Yes. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
maybe that is part of understanding
Yeah.
who you're spending your time with, and who you're
Mhm.
choosing to spend your time with as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it's one of the things that I've learned about um, women's power dynamics and how women interact with power is that women really value transparency. So like safety and all of that is very important to women. So it's like, we're not walking down a dark alleyway. I have this like woods trail near my house. My husband will walk it at night by himself with our dog. I'm
Hell
never
no.
walking that.
Hell no.
Hell no. Hell to the no. Like, we need to see, we need transparency. We value that. It's
That's a
very
great,
important,
yeah,
you know?
that's a great
And
anecdote.
there's major reasons why we do that. So when we hear things like women often dislike office politics, it's because the power dynamics aren't clear and they feel
Mm.
hidden and it doesn't
Ooh,
feel transparent, right? And
that's
so
really
some of what we're
powerful.
talking about, right, is that how women react when things aren't very clear to us and how we thrive when things are clear to us. And so sometimes with our networks, for me, it's been really important to create networks and create ecosystems where there are very open and clear discussions about how things are done, how to negotiate. About, for instance, we talked about, hey, you don't have to over explain. And in fact, as a leader, the more you over explain or over justify, the more you actually subtly diminish your power.
Mm.
And so, even just like that is a very direct conversation that more women need to be having, that we need to hear it. Men sometimes in their networks, that is communicated subtly. In our networks, it's usually not communicated at all.
Mm.
And so having these clear discussions, I think, can be very, very helpful.
How do you find the right communities? Is it through transparency? How do you
Yeah.
find the right group? And I know that you put together
Yeah.
roundtables and
Mhm.
communities as well, but how do you help guide people find the right ones that are going to be a good fit?
Oh, this is such a great question because it does really matter. It matters a lot, I think.
Yeah.
And for everybody, it's going to look a little bit different. But what I would say is, I think um, it's really important, I think, for everybody to, again, I always think about structure. So I create structure for myself. And that structure looks like, um, what are the type of, so I'll just give you a personal example for myself and how I think about it. So one approach is women entrepreneurs. If I were thinking about what conferences do I want to go at, what leaders or power partners do I want to connect with, what clients do I want to attract, how do I want to show up, so it's very clear to people who I am and how I'm different and why they so that for the right people working together or connecting is inevitable. Let's say something like that. So, and you mentioned that many of the people who are listening to the show, they're in their 40s. They're probably a little bit they're established in their field. So,
Yes.
this advice would be different than for somebody earlier. But for us at this stage of leadership, restraint is one of the most important things, and the places where we aren't are as important as the places where we are.
Did
So
you
it's
say
like
restraint?
restraint.
Restraint.
Yeah,
Tell me more.
restraint. Like, where are we not? What are we not doing becomes as important, every bit as important as the things that we are doing. So, an
Like
example,
discernment,
yeah,
like real
totally, it's about
discernment.
discernment. That's where our power comes from at this stage, I think, because we have the ability to discern. Whereas the version of ourselves at 25 did not have the same experience. Did not have the same ability to discern. So we're much more open, you know? And I'm not saying that we're not open anymore. I just think there's that sort of discernment filter is there. So the first, I think, is really good standards about, hey, what are my standards? What rooms no longer work for me? And
Mm.
so an example could be, you know what? I'm, done with um, uh, networking events that only attract junior players at an earlier stage of their career trying to establish themselves. There's no shade here. There's nothing there for me. I just always feel out of place.
You have to
That might
protect
be
your time and energy. Like it
yes,
really is a thing.
exactly. You know, it could be that um for me at this stage, this is what I'm, really want to stand for. This is the personal brand that I'm building. This is the conversations that I'm a part of. Let's say that you are a senior leader in the field of customer success, you know, and you might be like, you know what, at this stage in my career, I'm really only looking. I'm not looking for massive conferences. I'm looking for small rooms with high level leaders where there are worthwhile conversations happening. So I'm actually looking for events that have fewer than 100 people. They are targeted very specifically for senior decision makers. Like that's the kind of, and I think as you
It's
start to
almost like
put
a dream
together,
list for your guy.
it's a
Like
dream
trying to
list. You
find
know
a
what I
man
mean?
for your partner.
Exactly. Right? It's like, what rooms am I a part of?
Yes.
What rooms am I not a part of? And that I think becomes really important, that discernment. Yeah.
I
So
love that.
even
That's
just
really
having that
powerful.
list. Yeah.
Eleanor, I love it. And I'd love to see. I really appreciate this because I think it's a conversation I have not ever heard before. And so
Yeah.
having a newer, fresher conversation that is like there is another avenue for us to claim
Yes.
where we belong and change the culture, which is kind of what we do here at Culture Changers. Uh,
Yes.
is we no longer sit on the sidelines. There's no time for that. But I'm curious how if people want to know more about you or want to work with you, how do they get in touch?
Oh, so the best way I think is to reach out directly on LinkedIn or Instagram at Eleanor Beaton. I'm relatively easy to find there. My website is safimedia.co. And I so appreciate this conversation.
And you have a podcast called Women Owned, which is really,
Exactly.
really good.
Oh, thank you. The Woman Owned Podcast. Yeah, that's a great place, particularly for the entrepreneurs in the house. That would be a good go-to resource.
I love that in your podcast. I'm a podcast strategist, so that's what I do full time. And so I'm listening to it, and it is structured really, really well. And it's very succinct and direct and very smart. And the fact that I could recite back to you what you do and who you serve is a really good thing.
Ah. Oh, I love that. That's high praise.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Eleanor. I appreciate it. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Wow, that was an episode. Big thanks to Eleanor Beaton of Safi Media. I have linked all of her information and ways to connect or work with her in the show notes. Please be sure to let her know you heard about her from me and Culture Changers podcast. And as for you, I'm so curious to know what was unearthed for you in this episode. Like I said, you're not going to listen to it and be neutral about it. You're going to have an opinion one way or the other. You can DM me or better yet, post about it on the socials and tag me. Personally, I would love the option to have my obsessive need to stay looking youthful and relevant compensated for. Now let's talk about you. Are you wanting to grow your platform with a podcast? There is no better time to start one than now. The world is ready and the medium is growing like crazy because that is how culture changes. Your ideas, your conversations, your brilliance, don't gatekeep them. If you want some help, book a time with me for a free clarity call and let's make yours really irresistible. Go to AllisonHair.com/free call. As always, thanks for listening. And if this episode stirs something for you, great. Go leave me a review. And also, tracks like You might also be a culture changer too. Thanks for listening.